Today's the day. Today we are finally getting to the present day in world history class. So we started back in August with about 3000 BC, and today we are getting all the way to 2019. All right, so we're going to talk about the last 10 years in American and global history. All right, so starting with the presidential election of 2008. Who ran? All right, well, first you have John McCain. He was the senator from Arizona, and he was the Republican nominee. Now, on the Democrat side, most people believed that Hillary Clinton was going to get the nomination for the Democrats, and it was between her and this new guy named Barack Obama that people had not really heard about, and she narrowly lost to Barack Obama. He was 47, very young for a presidential candidate, senator from Illinois. He only had 4 years of experience in politics, all right, so very small resume, but he was a very good speaker, and he promised to bring change to America, which is what people wanted at the time. So due to the kind of malaise in our country over President Bush and the Republican Party, who a lot of people were not satisfied with at the time, Barack Obama was able to decisively defeat John McCain. And something about John McCain, he didn't even ask President Bush to endorse him, which was kind of like a slap in the face, but that really shows how unpopular President Bush had become by 2008. If you look at that map there, even the solid Republican state Indiana voted for Barack Obama. Okay, so the Democratic Party also took control of the House of Representatives and the Senate by 2008, making the Democratic Party very, very powerful. So kind of the opposite of what it is today. Today, the Republican Party has the presidency, has the Senate, and up until a couple months ago had the House of Representatives as well. But now the Democrats have taken that back. So it's kind of like a pendulum swing. Sometimes Democrats are more powerful, sometimes Republicans, and it really goes back and forth. Now, upon entering office in 2009, Barack Obama's first priority was to try to save the economy because the Great Recession had begun in 2008. The housing market had collapsed, and he said he wanted to try to save the economy. So he enacted what became known as the stimulus package or the Recovery Act, and this was an $800 billion bailout program in which the federal government gave billions and billions of dollars to failing companies, failing banks, to try to keep them from going under, keep them from going bankrupt and having people lose their jobs. All right, now this was pretty controversial because it added so much to our national debt. And there was the whole question about should we really bail out failing businesses or should we let them fail so that other, better, stronger businesses take their place and it can kind of correct itself? Or is this the best, most compassionate way? And there's a lot of disagreement about that. There still is today. This is seen as not entirely unsuccessful, but mostly unsuccessful because it added nearly $1 trillion to our national debt, and it resulted in increased taxes in the long run, was not really able to jumpstart our economy like Obama was hoping. So the state of the economy during Barack Obama's presidency was part good, part bad, all right? Now, starting with the good here, the unemployment rate steadily dropped during Obama's presidency, and the stock market grew. Okay, so from the time he entered office in 2009 to when he left office in 2017, the stock market was better than the way he found it, and the unemployment rate was also better than he found it as well. But then on the bad side, you have the number of people on welfare and government dependency also increasing dramatically during Obama's presidency, and the national debt increased by $10 trillion. That's an unfathomable number, and the debt is still climbing by $1 to $2 trillion every year, and it doubled under Obama. When he came into office, it was $9 trillion, and by the time he left, it was $19 trillion. Okay, so the government spending on things like the stimulus package, Recovery Act, like Obamacare, which we'll get into, that while some people say that did a lot of good for people, it also added a ton of money to our debt, thus weakening our economy overall. Now, the greatest achievement of the Obama administration was being able to find and kill Osama bin Laden. That was huge. All right, that was huge. On May 2nd, 2001, SEAL Team 6, ordered by President Obama, killed Osama bin Laden. This was the long-awaited result of the 20-year search for this evil, terrible man. And the world is now safer with him dead. There were all sorts of celebrations after this happened. There's a famous picture at top there in the Situation Room where they're getting an update on the operation, and finally were notified that he had been killed. All right, so a huge moment of victory for us finally getting some justice after 9/11. There were two legislations that were signed by Bill Clinton that Obama did away with. One was the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA. This was the one that said that marriage is going to be between a man and a woman, according to the federal government. Obama did away with that, thus opening the pathway to gay marriage, which came a little bit later. And he also did away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which said that gays in the military had to be quiet about their sexuality and you were not able to ask someone about that. So he did away with that as well. Now, something that occurred in the Middle East in the spring of 2001 is called the Arab Spring. So if you look at all those countries there, in each of those countries, a revolution of some sort occurred during the spring of 2011 to kind of the spring of 2012-ish, right? But most of it took place in the spring of 2011. So a series of revolutions in various countries in the Middle East, including two of the biggest ones being Egypt and Libya. These results often resulted in rebels overthrowing their country's leaders. Just boom, 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 more and more results, more and more revolutions happening across the Middle East. All right, Egypt overthrew Hosni Mubarak, who had been in power since the 1980s. Libya overthrew Muammar Gaddafi, who had been in charge since the 1980s. Okay, so huge changing of the guard in these Middle Eastern countries. Now, that's not to say that these countries have become better places always because of the revolts. Okay, sometimes they kind of replaced one bad system with another, but it still did bring a lot of change to the area. Now, one area that the U.S. got involved in with the Arab Spring was in Libya. So Libya, you see there on the map, it's in North Africa on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, when the Libyan rebels, when they revolted against the regime of the dictator Muammar Gaddafi, the Obama administration got involved. Obama funded and assisted the rebels in overthrowing Gaddafi because Gaddafi, like Saddam Hussein, was a bad guy. He was a bad leader, bad to his own people, similar to how Saddam Hussein was. So the U.S. then helped the Libyans form a new government, and U.S. forces occupied Libya for several months, close to a year. But then, on September 11th, 2012, the American office in Benghazi, which is right here in Libya, on the coast right there, not too far from Tripoli, the American office in Benghazi, Libya, was attacked by radical Islamic terrorists. It was just overrun. And this resulted in a lot of injuries and also the deaths of 4 Americans, okay, 3 soldiers, and then the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens. Now, Obama and his Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton, both received a lot of criticism after Benghazi because some believed they did not send in support that could have saved those 4 lives. The support was late in coming in. Okay, some say that Hillary Clinton did not wake up to receive the call, or that she hesitated or didn't send in troops when she should have to save those 4 lives. Okay, so both of them, Obama and Hillary Clinton, received quite a bit of criticism after Benghazi, and it became a scandal. So December 15th, 2011, President Obama removed the last of the U.S. combat troops from Iraq, officially ending the war. Now, ever since the surge in 2007, the war had been going well in Iraq, and we had been able to remove troops little by little. And then on December 15th, 2011, Obama removed the last of all American troops, thus ending the Iraq War. Now, at first, this seemed to be a very good thing. I remember thinking this was a great thing. The war is finally over. We have won. Okay. However, since the U.S. had not yet completed its final goal of replacing Hussein's government with a former democracy that's stable and would last, we had not yet accomplished that. Therefore, the American departure left what's called a power vacuum. That means space where there's nobody in power. Therefore, you have a lot of different groups trying to grab that power. And a lot of times, tyranny and oppression follows there. Okay, now one group that filled this void was this newly formed radical Islamic group, ISIS. All right, now at its height, if you look on that map there, all that territory in the red was controlled by ISIS. ISIS had a caliphate that controlled 8 million people at one point, and they gained this power after the U.S. pulled out of Iraq. So the election of 2012, Obama ran against Mitt Romney, and he decisively won re-election against Romney. This was a little bit closer than his first election against John McCain, but the results were fairly similar. A lot of people wanted to give Obama a second chance. Mitt Romney was a fairly strong candidate, but one controversial area of Obama's presidency was Obamacare, and Mitt Romney was one of the only Republican candidates who really couldn't criticize him on that, because when he was governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney had put forth a universal health care plan as well. Okay, so that's a big reason why Obama was able to beat Romney in 2012. A lot of Americans wanted to give President Obama a chance to kind of finish what he started with his economic and foreign policies. So the domestic policy that President Obama spent most of his time on while in office was the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, better known as Obamacare. So this is a government-run universal health care system that some people like and others don't, okay? And I'm not going to say whether this is a good or a bad thing. It's completely up to you to decide for yourself. I have a lot of people in my life that say both things, okay? So it's a matter of opinion. Now, the future of this program is still in question at this time. I know President Trump is not a supporter of Obamacare and would like to repeal it, but he has not had any success with that as of yet. But that is something that is kind of on the table. Now, the environmental disaster that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, some of you guys probably remember that, was the BP oil spill. I think the official name is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. But this was when an oil rig off the coast of Louisiana exploded. Okay, so several people died in the explosion, but after that explosion, oil just started to gush into the ocean continuously from that oil rig. You had the underground pipes or underwater pipes that was just gushing oil into the Gulf of Mexico, and it literally could not be stopped for weeks. Now, we've had oil spills before, for example, the Exxon Valdez a few decades ago, but when a ship crashes and the oil from that ship spills, yeah, that's bad, but it's a set amount of oil and it doesn't continue gushing for days and days and weeks, okay? This was much worse because you literally have oil from the ground, a seemingly endless supply, flowing into the ocean, and really nothing could be done about it for a very long time. So this resulted in a total of 5 million barrels of oil being released into the ocean. Huge waste of fossil fuels, of resources we could use for energy, as well as something that was awful for the environment. There's a picture there of the oil just gushing into the ocean. Now, this killed thousands and thousands of animals, and it harmed a lot of industries as well, and beaches. So BP itself has never fully recovered from this. You used to see BP stations all over the place. Now you hardly ever see them anymore. And that's because of this oil spill. So here you see a picture of the coastline in, I think that was Mississippi. Shortly after the oil spill, you had animals just covered in the oil, and it was a real problem, and it took a very long time to fix. There was a conservative movement going on in 2010 called the Tea Party movement, kind of like an anti-establishment group within the Republican Party, right-wingers, and this group influenced the 2010 congressional election. So their big issue was that government had gotten too big. Government needs to be smaller. The government needs to spend less money, and that we need to be taxed less. All right. So kind of similar to like the Reagan Revolution. All right, similar to Reaganomics, and this was called the Tea Party movement. So the Republican Party was able to gain a majority in the House of Representatives due to this movement. You had a ton of Republicans winning in the 2010 midterm elections, and then in the 2014 midterm elections, Republicans gained a majority in the Senate. Okay, so remember how I said in 2008, Democrats really controlled all of every branch of government? Because of the Tea Party movement in 2010 and 2014, the Republicans took back control of the Congress, and then in 2016, of course, got the White House as well. In October of 2011, this is just kind of a fun fact that shows you kind of where we are right now in world history. In October of 2011, the global population reached 7 billion people for the first time in history. Now it's closer to 7.5 billion. All the experts say that the global population is probably going to max out around 9 billion around 2050, and then it's going to slowly decline because people are having fewer kids now. In 2012, there was an elementary school shooting at Sandy Hook School in Connecticut. You had a lot of 6-year-olds just being shot by this maniac. And we've had school shootings before. We've talked about some before, like Columbine and Pearl High School. We've had some more recently, like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. But this one was especially wicked because it targeted elementary school kids, not even teenagers, okay, not even people who maybe might be able to defend themselves. No, like helpless, innocent children were slaughtered by this maniac here, and just incredibly sad occasion here. Now, this caused President Obama to push for gun control for the rest of his presidency. Whenever there was an incident of gun violence, Obama would make a speech about how he believes we need more gun control in our country, and that was a big part of the rest of his presidency. Now, tragically, something that began to increase more from 2014 to 2016 in the United States were terrorist attacks. Now, remember, for the remaining 7.5 years of Bush's presidency, from September 11th, 2001, all the way until he left office in 2009, there were not any terrorist attacks on American soil. Huge accomplishment. But within a few years after that, you have terrorist attacks starting to happen on U.S. soil again. And most of them were supported or carried out by the newly formed terrorist group ISIS. Some examples of these shootings are San Bernardino, California, and Orlando, Florida. If you remember the Pulse nightclub shooting, I think that was in June of 2016. About 50 people were killed there. There have also been many ISIS attacks in Europe and the Middle East in the past 4 or 5 years. Now, the ISIS caliphate has been destroyed, which means they have no more territory, but there are still members of ISIS carrying out terrorist attacks around the world. Now, there was a very influential Supreme Court ruling in June of 2015, and this was Obergefell versus Hodges. Obergefell versus Hodges. So this changed the legal definition of marriage for the United States. Remember, I said the Defense of Marriage Act, signed by Clinton, was overturned, was repealed by Obama during his time in office. And shortly after he repealed the Defense of Marriage Act, the Supreme Court tried a case and stated that the right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples in the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment, remember, that was 1868. That was what gave black people citizenship. And so you had 5 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court saying, well, citizenship rights to African Americans, we can now reinterpret that to mean marriage rights for homosexuals as well. Okay, so that's kind of how they interpreted that to come to this conclusion. And because of that, 5 voted for it, 4 voted against it, and this caused Obergefell to pass into law, and this made gay marriage legal in all 50 states. Before this, it was only legal in a handful of states, and it was illegal in most states in America. And then after this, gay marriage is legal everywhere in the United States. So something interesting about President Obama, he was against gay marriage during his first term. He ran in 2008 against gay marriage. Pretty much everyone was at the time. And then about halfway through his halfway through his presidency, he began to support gay marriage, becoming the first president to do so. And then I believe Donald Trump is also in support of gay marriage. Okay, so huge change on that issue in public perception. All right, so now we get to Donald Trump. Donald Trump obviously won the presidential election of 2016 in a surprise victory. Most people, including myself, believed that Hillary Clinton would be the next president, but Donald Trump won. And so let's talk about his first years as president. Okay, so at the time of making this, it's 2019. Trump has been president for about 2.5 years at this point, and the economy since he's been president has been phenomenal. So he and congressional Republicans passed a tax reform bill, very similar to Reagan's tax reform bills, and this lowered taxes for both corporations and individuals. The unemployment rate as of 2019, when I'm making this, as of May of 2019, the unemployment rate has sunk to 3.6%. That's the lowest the unemployment rate has been since the 1990s. And you also have the stock market surging. The stock market has been breaking a lot of records lately. Okay, a lot of people's investments are doing very, very well. So the economy is very strong at the moment. However, on the negative side, Trump and Congress also increased government spending. Okay, I've said this before, but every president since Reagan has had a spending problem. They just spend on different things, and Trump is no exception to that. Okay, so they increased government spending, continued to increase our national debt, and as of now, our national debt is at $22 trillion. All right, so it's increased by about $3 trillion in Trump's 2.5 years in office. Right, it's not sustainable. Hopefully, it's something that gets changed soon. During his first 2 years, Trump appointed 2 Supreme Court justices. That's pretty rare. Usually, a president might get 2 Supreme Court justice nominees in the entire course of his presidency, but already just in his first 2 years, Trump has been able to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices because of the death of Antonin Scalia in 2016 and the retirement of Anthony Kennedy in 2018. All right. So Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, that's their names, definitely 2 names you need to know for the test here. Neil Gorsuch, the guy in the top photo there, he was approved very quickly by the Senate. And then the next year, when Anthony Kennedy resigned, he retired, then Trump appointed a guy named Brett Kavanaugh. Now, right before Brett Kavanaugh's Senate vote, right before he was about to be voted into the Supreme Court, which is a lifetime appointment, this woman came forward and she accused him of sexual assault from back when they were teenagers, about 30 or 35 years before. And this postponed his hearing due to an FBI investigation. It lasted weeks, and the accusation could not be proven. No evidence was brought about to indict him. There wasn't really any proof or evidence brought forward by the accuser. Therefore, he was able to be narrowly approved by the Senate, and this gave conservatives a majority in the Supreme Court for the first time in 50 years. For the past 50 years, at least 5 of the judges on the Supreme Court have been liberal, and at a maximum of 4 have been conservative. But now with Kavanaugh replacing Kennedy, you have conservatives in a majority on the Supreme Court. Okay, so it's possible that you might see some more liberal rulings like Roe versus Wade overturned at some point in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. Now, President Trump's foreign policy so far, there have been many big events during his first few years. First, he met with Kim Jong-un at a historic summit in Singapore to discuss denuclearization. Hopefully, that good things will come from that. Once again, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. That's part of learning history this recent, but we'll just have to see there. Hopefully, something positive will come from it. Trump also focused a lot on trade by imposing sanctions and tariffs, especially on China. Some say he kind of started a trade war with China, so we'll see how that goes as well. Trump has also appointed Secretary of Defense James Mattis, who fiercely fought ISIS, and ISIS was completely eliminated as far as its territory is concerned in March of 2019. General Mattis did a very good job as an excellent general, excellent Secretary of Defense. Okay, so the ISIS caliphate was able to be completely destroyed during Trump's first term in office. He's had a lot of victories, but he's also had a lot of failures, and his legacy really remains unknown. Okay, so going into the summer of 2019 here, just a few major events of 2019, there was a partial government shutdown in January because Democrats and Republicans couldn't agree on a wall on the U.S. border with Mexico. So the future of border security in the U.S. is still in question. And you also have Democrats starting to campaign for the 2020 election, in which Donald Trump will be running for re-election. So we'll see how that goes in 2020. So as the world enters the summer of 2019, as we're about to do, the global economy remains strong. And as of now, there are no major wars going on, thankfully. Okay, so that brings us up to the present day. Let me know if you have any questions. It's been a pleasure teaching you guys this year.